All right, they're gone. Unfortunately, I just broke this up into another video. Well, they're not gone. It's just an unfortunate thing today they're here, but I can't do anything about it. Those things are enough to drive anybody batty. Well, he was going down the hall, and now he's come back. That's just... I apologize for that. I really don't know what the heck to do about it. There's not much I can do. Anyway, this artist would take his pencil and he'd put it on his piece of paper and he would just leave it there. And he'd go ride the bus or whatever, he was commuting to work and all this other stuff. And he'd just let whatever the little vibrations were, you know, from just holding the pen there, was defining his artwork. He trying to track things that way. I thought that was kind of a interesting sort of thing. I mean, when you're done, you might not have anything more than one dot that's a little bit bigger than that. I mean, but it was, you know, I could see where one could do a thing like that and, you know, continue with a concept or an idea like that. Everything is open in this endeavor of art, anything and everything. And, I mean, within civility, of course. But I mean, that's the beauty of it. That's why I say it's such a terrific experience for anybody, you know. I mean, you know, you can, I mean, I like sports and stuff like that, and you can get into all the athletics, and I don't see anything wrong with athletics at all. I played football, I played baseball, I mean, I follow baseball, even now. But, you know, I mean, sometimes too much of a distraction like that doesn't amount to too much, I don't think. I don't know, that's kind of a poor opinion on my part. But I just think that something like this, like art, especially if you're involved with it, it doesn't matter what, your involvement can be whatever you make out of it. You know, you can, maybe you're just someone who likes to look at it, follow it, and read about it, or go see it mostly. And you can make that an endeavor. You know, you can become like an art historian doing that. You know, I mean, you know, if you don't feel the inclination or whatever to make art, you know, I mean, I just happened to, from an early age, I was always drawing, and my father had some ability in art, and he showed me how to draw perspective space at an early age. And from there, I would mark up my mother's furniture with railroad tracks disappearing into the vanishing point. And, you know, I just continued drawing, you know, and making art. And the next thing you know, I was on my way to art school when it came time for college. So, I mean, that was a very good experience. And I'll tell you, you will, I don't know what the education system's like these days, you know. High school art was not much when I was in school. It was just kind of like a crit course for people to, you had to have some electives, so you took art because you figured, well, it's going to be easy and you'll get an A or a B in it just for showing up. And I mean, nowadays it's not like that. Nowadays, you know, you got teachers pretty serious about what they're doing and trying to really educate the kids. So, I mean, it's a lot different than when I was at school. Plus, I see enormous amount of talent. This thing's going pretty good. An enormous amount of talent, people at that age level and everything. It's encouraging and impressive to see, you know. Young people have a difficult road mapped out ahead of them, but they have access to so much stuff that we never had when I was younger. And I think in that respect it's a pretty positive sort of thing for them. Just as long as the crazy frustrations of life don't eat them up, which can happen. That part I don't like. I think living in a near large urban hubs I mean, that's an advantage for anybody who's involved with the arts. That's not to say that you can't live on Walden Pond or whatever, you know. I mean, you can and be very productive. I mean, Robert Frost, I guess, wrote most of his stuff in the backwoods of New England. So, you know, that type of existence is great. You know, you could be like a Hudson Bay painter, you know, living in the Hudson River Valley. And did I say Hudson Bay? I meant Hudson River. And paint beautiful landscapes like Thomas Cole and people like that. I mean, landscape is one of the most American of genres there is, because the United States is fortunate to have, boy, you can tell how much that nib has been worn down. America very fortunate to have such a variety of physical features in it. I'm about ready to move the camera. This thing is getting all broken up. I don't want to move the camera I don't want to turn the video off. I think I can move this without doing that. Just because. We will take this, plump, put it right here, put that like that. That's not bad. Looks pretty decent. Maybe back this up a tad. Direct this down a tad, move that down some, grab my chair. Well, at least the leaf blower left. Happy about that. Okay, that's right. Let's put this one over here, don't we? Gosh, these things are so old, these photo floods. I had them for ages. Perhaps this needs to go a little bit more like that. And then I can sit right here and jaw dog. Okay, that's good. Oh, now I got my neck breaking again. Oh well, that's the way it goes. Hard to get comfortable sometimes doing this stuff. I'll have to go back on YouTube and watch how other people do it. They usually have the camera kind of over their shoulder, looking down on their artwork as they work it, as they draw it and create it. And they keep their mug out of it, which is a good idea. I should probably do the same, but I'm just not set up to do that yet. I will eventually get there, I think. I've already gotten a few responses on my first drawing that I did, which was broken into 3 parts. This is going to be broken into multiple parts, unfortunately. I didn't want to do that, but I did. There was a artist who was associated with, or maybe you might have to say the leading component of what was called back then op art, or optical art, and it was Bridget Riley. And she became a lost commodity for a long time, but now you see her stuff in the galleries again. And her repetition of forms are very uniformed. I mean, really, it's something that the digital artist could just have a field day with, because I mean, but she did these things by hand back in the 60s and in the early 50s, or in the late 50s. And that's a pretty amazing task, you know, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, op art was pretty cool. I mean, a lot of visual effects. I mean, You know, Frank Stella was associated with the op artists for a good while, and Larry Poons, and I keep forgetting I don't know if his name is Soto. He's from either Brazil or Chile, and he did some amazing pieces. And there's a couple of the, actually I had some of his stuff at the Hirshhorn here a few years back. It was really cool. He had one piece where all these plastic strings were suspended from the ceiling almost to like a curtain, and you walked through the space, and what happened was that it altered your vision of what you'd see ahead of you with so much flickering of the lines as you walked through it that, I mean, it just kind of, it was like a kaleidoscope, I guess, or whatever. It was a pretty interesting piece, really. Amazing how much darker it is when you get started with these things. I think sometimes one of the fun things to do is you draw something in a pattern, but then you put something kind of like, it's like underneath, you see parts of it. So it clearly indicates that the shapes are overlapping one another, you know. Creates interesting little accents to what it is that you're doing. And they come up pretty, they're kind of playful is what they are. And this becomes kind of playful, you know. I guess that's why they call it a doodle. You know, I'm sorry that these lines have gotten so gray, because that marker was running out of juice, but it's not that bad. And the overall effect, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do with these things when I'm done. The other one, I just rolled it up and put a rubber band around it and just leave it there. I don't think I'm going to put them on the wall because I'd quickly run out of wall space. This is not a particularly large place that I live in. So I just we'll put them up on Facebook or on my website, which I haven't given you on my website yet, but I will. And you know, I've just started a Twitter account, and I don't know how to use it yet, but I'm going to sit down and just kind of read about it. I do have Instagram, and I post it there, and I post my artwork there, but it's not under this name that I have for YouTube, so I got to kind of coordinate all that stuff together if I'm going to continue doing this. I mean, I was frustrated with just trying to always send things into shows and stuff like that, and I said, you know, I mean, why don't I just make videos? Just, you know, it gives me the opportunity to talk, and it gives me an opportunity to draw at the same time, and people can see my artwork and watch, you know, the type of things I do. And who knows? Maybe it'll connect with lots of people, and maybe they'll, you know, enjoy it. I mean, that's really all I want out of this. I don't think I care whether I make money at it or not. You know, I mean, it's just, what did Marcel Duchamp say? He said, break even with art as far as your expenses and everything, plus 10%. I think that was the way he expressed it. Break even plus 10%. An interesting man. And really, I guess, the father of conceptual art, for sure. I mean, his piece, Fountain, was, you know, a lot of people who might be watching are familiar with it, where he took a urinal and turned it on its back so it looks like a fountain. And he signed it with a fictitious artist name called R. Mutt. And it always makes me think of R. Crumb. And stuck it in this think it was the Armory show of 19, I don't know what it was, 29, something like that. I don't know, 20, somewhere in the 20s, I think it was. I may be mistaken on that. And it was pretty controversial, and, you know, people got all bent out of shape about it, like so many things. And now it's a legendary piece of art. So, I wonder if there's any collector that wouldn't spend millions of dollars on that. That would kill them. That'd be funny, I think. You know, oh, hey, look at this. You want to see my Duchamp piece right here? How much did that cost? Well, I paid $40 million for it. No kidding. Wow, couldn't you just gone to Home Depot and got one yourself? Stuck it on the side? Well, maybe you could have done that. I don't know if they sell urinals at Home Depot, but you can get one somewhere. Who makes those things? American Standard? I don't know the company's Taylor. How many times you stood in front of us and read that and you still can't remember who it is? Yeah, Duchamp was an interesting artist. I guess his famous painting Nude Descending a Staircase is one of his masterpieces. Certainly the urinal was that, and what was it called, the rotary demisphere, which is an interesting thing. It's kind of like a pinwheel, you know, that operates a big kind of circular device which had a kind of closing spiral paint onto this thing, so that when the thing operated, you'd see it oscillating like it was, you know, going in and out and all the other stuff. It's kind of like a children's toy. And I actually saw the original one at a show at the, was it the Hirshhorn or the National? I can't remember now. I think it was in the National Gallery. There was a show on Dadaism. It was really a good show. It had an artist by the name of Kurt Schwitters, who was a big Dadaist and also one of the, really, I can't say he was the first guy to do collage, but he was certainly one of the great collage artists of his era. And, you know, as far as I know, I guess Picasso might have been the first person to do collage. I'm not sure about that. But for Schwitters, it was his main thing. And much like the more contemporary artist Jess from the I guess 60s and 70s, and he did enormous amounts of collage, and his stuff is very surrealistic. Actually, collage lends itself to that. But anyway, Schwitters had they reconstructed this project that he worked on for a long time called Merzbach. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It might be Merzbach, but and it was a room where he just, everything's at angles, and you know, it's like a it's like one of those Gothic kind of surrealistic films that were silent films that were made back then, where everything is kind of all the shapes are exaggerated into this kind of creepy looking kind of weird landscape. And Merzbach, I think, was finally blown up during the Second World War, but there was enough photographic records of it to for them to at least try to make a little bit of a recreation of it there in the Hirshhorn Museum, which was kind of neat to walk through, really. It was pretty cool. I mean, you know, it's just another example of all the crazy things you can do. I always read that de Kooning would never be satisfied with how his studio space was, and he would constantly have, I guess, engineers or contractors, or maybe he did it himself, I don't know. He was always moving things around, you know, the space just didn't bother us. I guess it's very much like his paintings. You know, his paintings constantly move around. Everything in his paintings are I'll make a gesture and then I'll wipe it out, and I'll make another gesture and I'll wipe it out, and I'll just keep working and reworking until I guess at some point you just say, well, I think I've worked it enough. You know, I mean, with these, I work towards coverage. I mean, once it's 100% covered, or reasonably covered, I consider it done. I don't really have a finesse point where I have to work some element of it, constantly reshaping. I mean, because these are very simple images that are drawn very quickly and very cartoon-like, and they're not difficult to draw. And I mean, I guess the beauty of it, or the artistic part of it, is in the way I combine these different elements. At least I like to think that's it. And so reaching coverage tells me, okay, you're done. That's it. You don't have to do any more on this one. You're pretty good. And let's stand up for a second. See what that does. Walks it right, that's for sure. Boy, I've got a whole lot of money up here, do I? So, what was I getting ready to do? I really don't know. Let's put some little weird things in here. Break that up so it doesn't look like the end of something. Anyway, look up Bridget Riley. I think most people will find her stuff pretty neat and enjoy looking at it. Now, almost everything I ever saw was black and white. I'm sure there's some color pieces, but really, in my memory, I'm just pulling this stuff out of the top of my head. Off the top of my head, I don't recollect any. Whereas someone like Larry Poons, color was very important with him. He would do these little shapes that almost looked like what you see when you get hit in the head too hard. Like a little stars flying around in front of your eyes. How's this looking? It's not looking too shabby. It's looking pretty good, I think. It's kind of strange. Let's mess it up a little bit. Let's put a great big something right here, and that will be a glob, which is not to be confused with a Blob, which was a movie with Steve McQueen. And I was in my photorealism that I used to do, that's why I did Frankenstein. I was very interested in the movies that I experienced when I was younger. Like Frankenstein, I mean, obviously that movie was made in, I think, the 30s, but I mean, or the 40s. But I mean, it would come on TV, long before cable, long before public TV. It would be like, you know what, I gotta just move that chair, it's almost time. There would be these late night things on the weekend for horror movies. And of course, Frankenstein and Dracula and all the classics, the Egyptian, I think, was the Boris Karloff one besides Frankenstein. And they'd come on, and as kids, we'd get all pumped up, say, oh man, Frankenstein's on tonight, gotta watch it. We got The Thing's on, with James R. Max and all that other stuff. But they'd all riled up, to watch it, and they'd come on like 11:30, and you'd watch it until it was 2 o'clock or something like that. And I think that fascination, because I was kind of lucky, and in some respects I had a TV in my bedroom. And a lot of kids didn't have that, parents wouldn't let them have it, but I had a little earphone for the sound, and I'd watch TV until sign-off. Can you imagine they had sign-off back then? They would actually, that's it, and they would play the national anthem, and then you'd get like one image on the screen, which was usually had some little test card images and a Native American with one of those war bonnet headdresses, and that was it. That image stayed on the screen until in the morning when they started broadcasting again. So it's not unless you like watching that for all night long, you turn the TV off and went to bed. And that was kind of how television was. I think there's something good about the fact that it came to an end, you know, as opposed to now where it's on all the time. There's something really creepy about that, I think, to my mind. I don't know what it is. It just doesn't feel right, you know, that there's constant TV going all the time, you know. I think because of that, it's caused sleep difficulties for countless people because it's there as an option to perpetually keep you awake. And people will utilize it that way. I don't watch TV at all anymore. Haven't watched TV in about maybe, except for being at a bar or something like that. I haven't watched TV for maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Maybe more than that. I used to watch Netflix some, but I don't watch that much anymore either. It begins to repeat itself too much. X's. I haven't done any X's in these pictures. Let's put some X's in. X's always look like those little picket defenses they had in World War I across the battlefield. Sad thing, really. People get all hung up in it and die. And we're going to put some X's in here. The vocabulary is clearly from, I think, experiences with cartooning. I think that's where, almost, at least with my imagery, that's where it kind of originates from. So I owe a lot of gratitude to the comic book artists for, you know, supplying my head with, I guess, a method of making shapes and images. You know, it's fast. That's one thing. So you get your kind of gratification right away as you work on it because it is so easy to construct. And so you make these drawings very elaborate with a multitude of shapes and forms and objects in them to kind of at least give it enough length to be of interest to yourself while you do it, and hopefully be interesting when other people look at them and they say, oh, look at this, what's going on? I don't want it to be like, you know, find Waldo in the picture or, you know, find the Pope in a pizza or something like that. It's just not really the intention of these things, you know. It's not like you're supposed to be scrutinizing it to find something specific. There's nothing specific in here. It's just a drawing, that's all it is. And it just goes on and on and on, you know. Yeah, it's kind of getting there. It's getting that overall super busyness look to it that you want. Some of the people I see on YouTube that do this are really, really good at it. They really do some spectacular stuff. And large scale and small scale both. I will do some small scale stuff too, because I like doing this. I'll go get a book and I'll show you some of the ones I've done. Hold on. Where is that book? Is this it? Let's skip past it over here. No, not that one. That's too small. Here. This might be. No, not that one either. Daggone, I don't know where the hell. Oh, maybe it was right behind me. Is that it? No, it's not it either. Damn, it's not. I don't know where the hell it went. It's crazy. I should probably turn the computer off. I'm walking away from it for this length of time. Well, I don't know where the hell the damn book is. I don't know where I put it. Shit, wasn't in that spot. I thought there was some. What the stupid things? Oh, maybe this is over here. Let's check. Nope, not that one either. Not any of these. Daggone. Okay, well, now wait. One more shot here. Nope, any of these. Okay, sorry. Can't show you that. I mean, this is long enough from you just staring at the wall. And come back and draw. I don't know where the hell the book is. I'll have to go find it. I need some more faces in here. Yeah. Let's put a little more of the World War I battlefield in here. It would be kind of interesting to kind of give a verbal equivalent to everything that I draw and then write it on there. Battlefield, you know, candy cane, long candy cane, you know, something like that, eyeball, frog with dots on his head, looks like a frog to me, you know, that kind of stuff. I'd make for an interesting thing. It introduces another element in the drawing, which is words and letters. You could just have arbitrary letters if you wanted. I mean, that might be an interesting thing too. I mean, Jasper Johns, to get back to the iconic artists, did a lot of stuff with just letters. I guess his flag series was interesting because it had a play on how we perceive space. I mean, the flag was the painting. It was just a painting of a flag. The flag wasn't attached to a pole and you could see the sky around it or anything like that. The whole painting from edge to edge was the flag. So how are you reading this painting? You know, it really proposed an interesting problem. It's very much like his sculpture of the Ballantine beer cans. He takes two Ballantine beer cans, casts them in bronze, and then goes back and paints the labeling back onto the bronze. So it looks just like two beer cans. And yet they're a sculpture that's been cast in bronze and then painted on. And it does give you awareness on how we, perception and how we perceive things in our world. I always thought that was yet another interesting piece where it's called The Critic Sees, and that's S-E-E-S, and it's a pair of glasses, looks like maybe sunglasses, just a regular pair of glasses, but you look inside, it doesn't really have glass on there, it's hollowed out, and you look in there and there's like a mouth talking. Critic sees with his mouth. I guess that was criticism. Somebody didn't like what he was doing, more than likely. Now let's put a big face in here. We need to put something in here. Let's start with the nose. And then we'll, oh, rats. The eyes going to wind up here right there. Okay, we'll do that. No problem. Like I had said in the first video I made that I like Jackson Pollock's work, but I found it a little all alike after a while. And one of the paintings that I thought was one of his best, which critics don't like at all, which shows you where I'm at, was Portrait of a Dream, where he did a kind of an abstract face next to one of his, drip paintings. And I thought that was a pretty interesting picture. I know it's kind of like, cause and effect, or, call and response, like in blues singing or something like that. Here's the face, and here's these jumbled up, drips are the dream I'm having, that type of thing. So that might be a little simplistic, maybe. Maybe that's why the critics didn't like it. I don't know why they didn't like it. Who knows? But I liked it. I thought that was one of the more interesting paintings that he had done. And I still do feel that way about it. Pollock was pretty interesting because, even though, like I said, I don't like his work that much, because it was not what he painted, but it was how he painted that became the major part of his contribution to art. And from that, art came right off the canvas and became an event. So you had the beginning of things like the happenings and stuff like that back in the 60s, where they took that idea, because what was becoming apparent to people when they'd watch this was, especially after they did that film, where he painted on glass or whatever, or acrylic, whatever, the camera's underneath looking at it. It became apparent that the act of painting was more important than what it is that you were painting. And that became a major movement in art in itself, right there. And, that's pretty cool, isn't it? I mean, to me, stuff like that fascinates the hell out of me. I mean, it's just kind of neat, how interesting how people can take a certain element of what a person does and then extrapolate it into something entirely different. I hear children outside playing, or it sounds like a little infant. There's a school bus that stops outside every morning. I don't know what school is. It's summertime. I don't know what school it would be. This cat's weird looking. No doubt. I don't normally draw with holding the pen like that. I usually like this. But there's no reason why you can't. And I'm doing it. I need to put a little tree over here. Do like Bob Ross. Put a little tree over here. Bob Ross had a great attitude on the way that he talked about the things he did. This is a very strange looking face. Can't say I like it very much, but that's all right. And a very soothing voice, and a great delivery, and a very important person, as far as I'm concerned, because he made art accessible to everybody. And I think that's the beauty of Bob Ross. And I think that's great. I think everybody should go out and do this. And not be, like nowadays they've got these cafes or whatever, bars, where you go in and they for the evening, you do a painting. It's very popular. A lot of people do it. I'm all for it. I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a cool idea. Everybody gets to go out and have their own experience making this, and maybe get drunk in the meantime. I don't know if they get drunk, but What is this, another self-portrait? That expression that every portrait you do is a self-portrait. I'm trying to see myself in this one here. I don't know where the hell that. I don't buy that, but a lot of artistic, iconic sayings. I am nature. You know, that was the Pollock statement to when Hoffman said, "You don't work from nature." He said, "I am nature." Oh, okay, nice and profound statement. I get what he meant, but you know. And then there's I don't think this actually really happened, but evidently when Nazi Germans were closing down artists, they were in Picasso's studio when he was living in France. And he had just finished Guernica, and it was just propped up there in the studio. And the officer asked him, he said, "Did you do this?" And Picasso looked back at the officer and said, "No, you did." And it's a very profound remark, since, you know, the Germans were the ones who bombed out all the people and caused the response in the painting. But I think had he said that, he probably would have gotten arrested. So I don't think he really ever said that. But you might have, who knows? You know, maybe the officer just went, I wonder what he means to. I always liked Pollock's protege, to a certain degree, as his protege. Not protege, I'm sorry. His mentor. Well, his mentor was Thomas Hart Benton, but I mean, even further back than that, Albert Pinkham Ryder was kind of an influence on him. And Ryder's got some pretty unique paintings, and they swirl and morph and move all over the place, and some of them are rather stiff, which I think is okay. This is a rather stiff-looking drawing to me, especially this face is very stiff. I'm going to make him even stranger. I give him a great big ear. He's listening. And Ryder was not what you'd call a diligent craftsman. And I hate to go get a book to figure out all the crap in the ear, but I know it does something like that. It's close enough. And he would, you know, he'd paint thin over fat, which is a big mistake. And he would, like Pollock would grind cigarettes out in his paintings a lot. So I've never found one when I've looked, but they probably would fall off his canvas anyway. But that's what I read. And Ryder would spit tobacco in his. That's disgusting. And, you know, so I mean, the surfaces of his paintings have to be carefully maintained because they want to deteriorate. So obviously the archival business is not part of Albert Pinkham Ryder's style, but yet his paintings are still around, and they're great paintings. They were done in the 19th century, and you know, they're kind of, well, I won't say they're reminiscent of Blake, because Blake had really large, full, articulated humanoids in his paintings, you know. I mean, they were kind of, I think he was probably influenced heavily by the Baroque artists and, you know, the male form. And I really got close to the edge there, didn't I? Huh. That's all right. You know, I could tape on some pieces and go out here like that, and extenders. That'd be kind of a neat idea, wouldn't it? And incidentally, can you see this? Yeah, you see it. I hadn't even looked at the camera for a while. But, I mean, the phantasmagoria of Blake's work, and his poetry too, is very, I think Ryder's paintings are very similar to that, because he did a lot of the same sort of mythical characters floating all around space, and, you know, that sort of thing, which, that's one funky ear, isn't it? Which is part of what he did. And I think they're really great. I'm going to use the little chair now. So how many? Oh, we're into 43 minutes on this one. Wow, I'm gonna have to probably cut these things, and then I'm just gonna let this one go to 50 minutes or so, and then take them and I don't know how to knit them together, if you want to know the truth. And I'm sure there's a program to do that. Once I find out how to do that, I'll do that. But I don't know what I was talking about. I forgot. I was talking about Ryder. I know that. And they have a room with about 3 or 4 of his in the American Museum of Art, which is part of the National Portrait Gallery, which is one of my favorite galleries in Washington, D.C. And the paintings are they're just little rural landscapes, some cows, stuff like that. But they always seem to be sitting in a dreamscape with him. And that was, Blake's things are always in a fanciful world that couldn't exist, you know. Which is also part of a lot of the, I guess the symbolist artists were like that. Although Blake preceded the symbolist artists by quite a bit. But, and the symbolists were associated to a certain degree, maybe just by the fact that they were kind of close to each other in the same time as the Art Nouveau artists. And you can fact check me on that, please, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. And there was a lot of crossover in the styles and how they would depict things. Of course, symbolists were interested in all those mythical themes, you know, from Greek and Roman mythology and the Bible and, you know, all the different sources that Western culture relies on. I don't know very much about Eastern art, you know. That'd be something to look into. Certainly it had a huge, profound influence on American painters of the late 19th century and also European painters. Very huge influence there. The Japanese, you know, woodcuts and stuff like that were a big influence on Van Gogh and on a lot of the Impressionist painters and that whole Orientalism that was so prevalent even here in America had big influence on the compositions of Winslow Homer, who was probably America's greatest illustrator, I think. You know, so I mean, Eastern art is important. I feel ashamed of myself for not knowing more about it than I do. But I can remedy that, which I think I will. This guy looks really messed up. Let's give him his other ear goes out here like this. There we go. It's like Lyndon Baines Johnson. Well, I needed a large area to kind of counterweight the other. That goes right against what I was saying about balance. But I needed that anyway, and I just created that. So there it is. And maybe I'll just do, that'll take care of that whole area. That'd be weird, wouldn't it? It's actually not such a bad idea. Also shorten the video, which would be kind of nice. I'm sure people would be glad of that. And so Homer stuff, which, I mean, he was like, worked for Harper's Magazine. And, you know, that was, photography had been around already now for, I don't know when, it was Harper's, when Homer was illustrated a lot of stuff from the American Civil War. And Matthew Brady was the major photographer of the Civil War. And But photography had already been around for, I don't know, 20 some years, maybe more than that before the Civil War, probably more like 30 years. And, but yet still print media still relied, because maybe they found it difficult to reproduce photographs. I'll look into why that is, because I don't know the answer. But, you know, so Harper's used Homer's illustrations for their stories and articles and whatever they wanted to publish. And Homer did a great job of that. We didn't do a lot of really combat scenes, and neither did Brady, because there was just too much going on, plus it was death. Of course, Brady photographed death constantly. You know, his pictures from Gettysburg and Antietam are awful, really. I mean, it was such carnage. But, I mean, they were used as a form of influence, or I guess you could say propaganda. I don't know if that's the right word, but to convince people that what's going on here is absolutely awful. And I think it had a pretty good impact. But Homer was more than just a Civil War artist who worked for Harper's Magazine. I mean, he's probably the best American watercolorist to ever live. That's in that fence right there. And his watercolors are just beautiful. There is no hesitancy, which is more power to him. And they're not stiff. Hopper is another really good watercolorist, but his watercolors are always very stiff. And Homer, having a great drawing gift, would just float, and he would do everyday subjects. He would, obviously was quite the outdoorsman, because he's got watercolors of, you know, woodsmen and people hunting deer and shooting geese and fishing, lots of fishing, trout fishing, bass fishing, all that stuff. You know, he does these watercolors of that, because he would go out and do that himself. You know, and he'd be in a canoe and he'd be out there, you know, painting away from his subject. He used photographs too, but I think almost all the realist artists of the late 19th century were using photography as a starting point for their imagery. It's interesting how many actually trace. You know, I think I had mentioned that maybe in the first video. I kind of forget now. This guy's getting really strange looking. And there was, they used a form of, well, photography came out, they just used photographs themselves, you know, and then they would, like Degas would use them, and, you know, people who wanted the visual, I guess Manet used them, and, you know, wanted the visual information to be right on. And they also had the equivalent of camera obscura, which was the thing that the Dutch painters in the, I'm going to get this century messed up, I'm going to say the 16th century or 15th century, would use, like Vermeer and Peter de Hooch, or maybe de Hock, I don't know how you pronounce his name. I think it's D-E and then capital H-O-O-C-H, I think is how you spell it, I believe. I could Google that, but I'm not going to. And so camera obscura allowed you to see the image projected down onto an object, and or maybe back on something, and you could trace it off, and it allowed you to get your image 100% right. And I think it's David Hockney wrote a book about how much that was used during the Renaissance. And one of the things about those images is they are reversed. And there were, where it was evident, there were so many left-handed people, and left-handedness is not a dominant trait It's the lesser of the two. And so he always felt that that was a little bit of a giveaway that these artists were actually tracing. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with doing it. Norman Rockwell traced. He traced his subjects. I mean, yeah, he's a very revered artist. He never got much credit among the contemporary art world artists. You know, they didn't think much of him because he didn't do abstract art. And he did, and also it's not so much that he didn't do abstract art, but more that he did sentimental scenes, which is very true. A lot of his work was sentimental, except for when it came to civil rights. A lot of that was not sentimental. It was very pointed about the conditions and the situations involved. And actually, that's some of his best work, too. But, you know, Freedom from Want, you know, that very famous painting with the Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, whatever it is, with all the people sitting around the table and, you know, the mother's bringing the turkey in, setting it down, the old man standing up, I guess getting ready to lead the family in grace. You know, a painting like that, those were all Rockwell's friends, and he would photograph them and then lay it out, and then he would trace them off, and then he'd proceed to painting the image. So, I mean, when you see, a lot of times when you see a portrait that just is like so accurate, it's incredible. A good portion of the time, not all the time, but a good portion of the time, that portrait was done because the artist traced it, which is okay. A lot of people might say, oh, well, dude, that's like cheating. And I'm not a snob, but I feel it's cheating also. It really doesn't matter. I mean, it's the image, you know, I mean, Andy Warhol just took photographs of people and then he would silkscreen them and then he would put like little halos and stuff like that around them, and that was it for the image, you know. There's Pete Rose, you know, or Marilyn Monroe, you know, that type of thing. And I was just looking. I don't know what those are. Like a meteorite's flying out of his head. All right, I think I'm going to take a break, and we'll start another video here shortly. This is 55 minutes. That's pretty good. See you very shortly. Okay, bye-bye.